Yes, I do very well. Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate. We are really sorry, but we had such an exciting conference that it took some time, and we had some interesting debates. We are very thankful that you join us. I will quickly introduce you in Hungarian, then I summarize quickly what I told in Hungarian, and then the floor is yours. Is it okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Szeretném akkor magyarul bemutatni dr. Hazel Henderson-t, aki emeritus professzor, és az Ethical Markets médiának az elnöke és alapítója. Ez az USA-ban és Brazíliában működik, és ez egy úgynevezett tanúsított B-típusú részvénytársaság. Ugye mi magyarok ismerjük a NYRT-ket, meg a ZRT-ket, én ezt a BRT-t még nem ismertem. Ezek olyan társadalmi vállalkozások, amik még egyszer nagy cégek, és be kell számolniuk, hogy a missziójuk, ami a közcél, az micsoda. Meg lehet nézni, több mint 4000 ilyen cég van már a világon, úgy tudom, hogy Magyarországon még nincsen. Ezen kívül Hazel egy tévésorozatnak is a producere és a főszerkesztője, több könyvnek a szerzője, amik közül a Planetary Citizenship kiemelkedik. So Hazel, I told your short CV and your titles. I must tell you that about 3 years ago, I put together an article and tried to identify the 30 leading thinkers in the world from whom we can expect a paradigm change, and you were one of them. That's why we invited you here.
Oh, thank you.
And although not everybody are professional economists, but I think you could all play a major role in the post-growth thinking, that it will be mainstream in 50 years. So we really appreciate, and then please tell us what you would like. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, it's wonderful honor to be here with you all in Budapest. I have not been in Budapest for 15 years, but I love your beautiful city, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I must say that this book, which is The Economy Machine, I can't say it in Hungarian, but it is very much along the same lines as my thinking. So I'm just going to summarize my position, and hopefully, we can get into some discussion. And as you probably know, there's a great deal of interest in the USA, in my adopted country. I grew up in Britain. About the new opposition candidate who has emerged, Peter Márki-Zay. So we'll be following that quite closely. So what I mean by steering societies beyond GDP toward the SDGs is really about going more systemic, beyond economics, beyond the price system, and to the systemic view of the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, which were ratified by pretty much 193 countries at the UN in 2015. Next one, please. So this, just to introduce me, really, this book, which I wrote in 1981, really tried to talk about the alternatives to economics. And by that time, I had studied a lot of economic thought going back 200 years, and realized that what it was missing was the true situation of we humans on this planet, totally dependent on the free photons coming every day from our mother star, the sun. And of course, when that book appeared in 1981, Ronald Reagan had just become president. he took the solar panels off the White House, and I decided, okay, I will go to every country in the world where there is any interest in this book, The Politics of the Solar Age. And it was translated into many, many languages and got me to many, many countries around the world. Next one, please. And so all I was saying really is that the total productive system of any society is really like a layer cake with icing on the top. And as you all know, the money view of GDP is only half the story. The top two layers, the private sector and the public sector. And this is the whole economic model just measures those two top sectors and completely ignores the non-monetized productive work, which is actually much larger in most societies. And I called it the love economy, which is really the traditional economies based on the golden rule, based on mutual aid, as Kropotkin talked of, and basically the unpaid, loving, volunteer work, I must say, done by most of the world's women. And of course, the bottom layer, the productivity of Mother Nature, is what the whole thing rests on. And yet the economic profession and all the macroeconomic statistics which ruled our lives were based just on the price system. And I have always maintained that the price system is a function of human ignorance, because prices are always historic. So you're always backing into the future, looking through the rearview mirror. And of course, there is the allowance in the models of quote unquote externalities. So basically, the price system is a terrible model to try to run all of the macro statistics of a society. Next one, please. And so I was always looking for that expanded framework where, of course, you know, you can correct economics and you can correct the price system, you can bring in the externalities and everything like that. But it's always going to be surrounded by decision theory, general systems theory, and ecology and living systems. And I had gotten together many times with the descendants of the Nobel Prize, Peter Nobel, who is a lawyer in Sweden. And he and I wrote several articles together about what we called the fraudulent Nobel being given by the Central Bank of Sweden to legitimize economics as if it were a science. And as Peter Nobel pointed out, his great-grandfather had always understood that economics could never be a science. It's a good profession, and we all, you know, accounting is a good idea. Money and markets are wonderful inventions of human beings, and we have used money and markets for centuries, you know, in local communities, as was written by the stories of these unmonetized economies. Basically, they use shells or wampum or tally sticks, and markets were generally local. Although with all kinds of indigenous people, they traded across continents. As I say, using shells for money. So there's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with markets, but you have to know where they can be usefully applied to policy and where they create market failures, like in climate change. And as we have seen, particularly in the USA, in our healthcare system, which completely failed in the COVID pandemic. Next one, please. And so this was a very early, I did this, my gosh, in 1978, trying to explain to people that we had to come up with a net GDP. And in that way, at that point, I was a community organizer, and I had started a group in New York City called Citizens for Clean Air. And we recruited Senator Robert Kennedy, who was running for Senate at that point in New York City. And we showed him this and said, you know, that we will take you. We took him on a helicopter ride around New York to show him all of the pollution coming out of all of the factory chimneys. And he gave a wonderful speech in 1968. This really helped to get the whole idea that we had to go beyond GDP. The next one, please. And so, of course, everybody is familiar with this much broader, more holistic view of the Sustainable Development Goals. So next one, please, since I know you all know this one. And so I always try to remind people that we live on an abundant planet. And that big yellow box is the annual solar photons coming to the Earth every day. And the little box there in the front, that's our global annual energy consumption. So, you know, we're never going to run out of free photons. And that's why I really like the emphasis in this conference that you're having on dematerialization. Because basically, we have to understand that we don't need to dig in the earth and create all of these products that we have, everything else that are kind of keeping us within that price system. We just need to learn to harvest those free photons as efficiently as plants do. In the first technology on this planet, which, as you all know, is photosynthesis. So we're never going to run out of free energy. Next one, please. So basically, I was invited by the Calvert Group of Socially Responsible Mutual Funds in 1980 that were really trying to get into a conversation with the mainstream financial system by creating screens whereby we could judge the performance of corporations using social values and criteria. And so I was on the advisory council of Calvert for many years, and we presented in the year 2000, we put together this first alternative that came out of the private sector to GDP. And if you'll notice, you know, those 12 aspects of quality of life, very few of them were measured in terms of money or prices. You know, for example, urban air pollution, you wouldn't measure that in money. You would use the scientific metric of parts per million of junk in the air. And the same with health. You know, you'd use disability adjusted life expectancy and infant mortality. So we were trying to get this point across that you could go far beyond the price system. And of course, it makes the math more complicated. But on the other hand, going to the scientific metrics that are more appropriate for each of those domains is the reality that we have to face up to. Next one, please. And so I presented that model, the Calvert-Henderson indicators, at the European Parliament in 2007, where they had a wonderful conference that they invited me to be an advisor in putting it together. with the European Commission, and it was called Beyond GDP. And so we got together with GlobeScan, the global polling firm, and we prepared the first survey that we did in 12 countries, because I was sure that ordinary people would clearly understand that GDP was not the whole story, and that we had to go beyond GDP to measure health, education, quality of life in their own scientific metrics. And so the first one, all of those countries, we got huge supermajorities agreeing that GDP had to be expanded to cover these other scientific metrics. And we did it again in 2009. Because we thought, well, you know, after the financial crisis, maybe everybody would be regressed into fear and all that. No, we found the same kind of majorities in all those countries. We did it again in 2013. And this is the last one that we did in 2020, just before the pandemic. And so you can see that the general public in cultures all over the world, basically are way ahead of the economists in understanding the way we should measure real progress. Next one, please. And so I have been writing a lot recently about valuing the love economies. And of course, they are always larger, these unpaid traditional economies of caring and sharing and aid and barter based on the golden rule. They are larger in every country in the world than the official monetized GDP sector. The most obvious of that, as you all know, is sub-Saharan African countries, where economists from Western Europe and the USA will look at these countries and say, oh my gosh, they're poor. You know, they have such a small GDP. And of course, what they don't understand is in those countries, most of the productive activity is in the unpaid barter mutual aid sectors. And it wasn't until in Kenya about 5 years ago, where cell phones became the way to go, where they suddenly realized, hey, we don't even need to worry about the old financial system, and we'll forget the banks, and we'll just do all of our trading and exchange on our cell phones. And so that was how M-Pesa began, and it's now, you know, being used in many, many other countries in Africa. So basically, what happened in the Industrial Revolution, I think, is that money and markets became the easiest sort of way to create statistics, one-dimensional statistics. And so basically that price system view sort of began to become almost weaponized as a source of control. And of course, that's why the economics profession mostly serves power elites all over the world. Next one, please. But today, what's happening is that we're having this shifting valuation now of assets. And none is more clear, actually, than the book that the former central bank head of Britain, Mark Carney, the Canadian, who headed up the Bank of England. And I've just finished reading his new book called Values. And I could have written it myself. And he is talking exactly the same way, that if we don't recognize in their own metrics all of the values that go beyond the price system and always will, you know, we're going to end up with more and more financial crises, more and more market failures of the way we've seen them today. So what's happening now is that even accountants are beginning to realize that really it's what we're talking about now is digital assets that are bartered and traded virtually, locally, all information-based services, brands, patents, platforms, URLs, internet business models, and the whole materiality approach is now, it's still, the old accounting is still measuring stuff you can drop on your foot. And yet the whole world now is in services sector is moving toward the intangibles. And what's happening, of course, is that all of this is being shown up now by the emergence of cryptocurrencies, where these are a tremendous challenge now to the old monetary price system metrics. And at the moment, they're pure speculation. A lot of people are going to get hurt. They are worth nothing, you know. And yet what you have today is the central bankers are having to go toward digital currencies officially, whether it's the digital yuan in China or the digital coin-based, even the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve is talking about central bank digital currencies. They more or less have to do that because we have moved from materiality to this dematerialization where we realize that information is more valuable than any other asset. Next, please. So the old financial markets, which are still based on price system, they are now boxed in on all sides. You've got the socially responsible impact investors, you know, the kind of stuff that we did at Calvert. There are now 600 exchange traded funds, you know, that are labeled as sustainable. I'm worrying about them now because we're getting into greenwashing territory. And I have a whole thing going on right now, sort of leading a discussion about how do we go beyond these kind of metrics, because they're still based on the price system. And what they're trying to do now is to drag biodiversity and all of these other valuable domains back into the price system. And so we're having a very robust debate now about how do you go beyond this SRI and ESG kind of screening of companies. And on the other side, you've got all the young activism, the young people and the divesting movements. And then you've got the 195 nations that ratified the SDGs are now pushing the old financial sector from the top, where their finance ministers are saying, look, you have to now disclose your climate-related risks. And this is a big debate going on in the USA right now at our Securities and Exchange Commission to make it mandatory kind of disclosure. And then the old model is being attacked from the bottom by all of this fintech, the startups, these peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, cryptocurrencies, the thing going on in the African continent right now, and the cell phone banking. And so the change, I believe, will come much more rapidly than I would have thought a few years ago. Next one, please. And so we have been pushing for the last 2 or 3 years this approach, which we call transitioning to science-based investing. And we have been producing these reports tracking the green transition. We call them the Green Transition Scoreboard reports. We've been doing them since 2009. And we now really think that there is so much old investment from the old financial sector shifting into the new companies based on the free photons, solar, wind, energy efficiency, all of the wave power, hydrogen, green hydrogen by electrolysis, and all of this stuff we have been following. And our current estimate, cumulative estimate now of the amount of these old financial assets which have shifted to the green sectors is a cumulative $10.3 trillion with a T. And so we think that that is a large enough amount of money so that the politicians are realizing that all of their clients who gave them money from the fossil fuel industry, that they're suddenly finding themselves on the wrong side of history. And that the biggest risk now is to all of these so-called assets in fossil fuel reserves, which we know can never be lifted out of the ground and burned without cooking the planet. And so that's why you find on Wall Street and all of the stock exchanges now, the tremendous falling in value of the fossil fuel stocks. And even, you know, even The Economist, which comes out of London, is very orthodox. They are saying now, along with the International Energy Agency based in Paris, which is really based on the fossil fuel industries for forever, they're saying now we have to rapidly increase the shift of those investments away from fossil fuels, not put another penny of investment into fossil fuels, and ramp up very much more rapidly wind, solar, energy efficiency, green hydrogen, and all of the ways that we can go to economies which are really based on the way the planet actually functions, with those free photons being harvested more efficiently. So thank you very much. I think that's the time I'd like to end pretty much. You can find all of this material on our website and download anything that is interesting to you. And I'd very much like now to have a conversation with anybody who would like to jump in. Thank you.